Okay, we're live on YouTube.
Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's safe and well. Welcome to this meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee. My name is Councillor David Beeman, and I'm chair of this committee. This evening, I'm supported by a number of officers. Beth here, who's here on behalf of Chris French, yes. Lewis Jones, Philippa Smith, and Carl, who's under Daniel Holmes, and of course, Councillor John Rubini, who is the vice chair of this committee, and of course, Kimberly Saul. Right, let's get going. Kimberly, are there any apologies and substitutes, please?
Yes, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Simon Deere, Brian Edmonds, Kika Mirrlees, Peter Isherwood and Michaela Martin. Councillor Stephen Mulliner is substituting.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the last meeting. The minutes of the last meeting was held on the 16th of November. Have been published on the council's website. Are everybody happy with those minutes, please? Yes, agreed. Good, good. Declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members?
None received. Councillor Neil has his hand up, Chairman.
Yes, Councillor Neil.
Good evening, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, I need to declare an interest, I think, on items 9.1, 9.2, the Poundland application. I know the people around the building quite well. Thank you.
Chairman, I'm going to declare a pecuniary interest in 9.3 as I have an interest in a property within 400 metres of the application site, and therefore I will withdraw from the meeting before that item is considered.
Thank you very much. Okay. Could you speak up, Councillor Dixon, please?
Yes, I declare an interest in 9.1 and 9.2. I also know the people involved quite well, so quite difficult.
Excuse me, Chairman, can I just clarify what sort of interest that you're declaring, because it's very difficult. You've either got to declare a personal interest or a pecuniary need.
That's a very good question, Councillor Coburn. I think, well, I mean, I'll let them answer themselves, but I think there's knowledge of people rather than friends or knowledge. That's all.
No, I was asking Councillor Dixon because from what she said, I wasn't clear. I wasn't.
Yeah, okay.
So I know the Quillans because their son went with my daughter to summer camp together.
The test is, can you be objective? And will the man in the street think you can be objective? And if not, then I would remove yourself. If you're confident, then stay.
I think I'll remove myself.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, to be fair, I also know the Quinlans as well, but I feel I can be objective in my decision taking. Okay, right. Questions from members of the public, Kimberly?
We had a question which actually regarding LPP2, which was actually submitted to the Services ONS on Monday and responded to. So therefore, I don't propose to actually bring it up at this meeting, but just for information of the councillors, we did have that question.
Thank you. Questions from members? Any questions from members?
None, Chairman.
This is the last meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. Nothing of any relevance to the items on the agenda this evening.
Thank you very much. Right, we'll move to the main agenda. If you wish to speak, please raise your hand. And if you wish to speak, and please keep your microphone on mute when you're not speaking. And can I also point out that questions are kept as brief as possible and to the point. We'll be timing your speakers this evening, and an alarm will sound when you're speaking for 4 minutes. Let's get on to the main parts of the agenda, which is the first one is application subject to public speaking. And this is WA, the first one being WA 2020-1356, land 1 and 2 dairy cottages, Hillside Farm, Tilford Road, Churt, Farnham, GU10 2LN. The proposal is an erection of 2 detached dwellings and associated works following demolition of 2 existing bungalows, a revision of the application WA 2020-1356. We have Carl, who's online because he's been in contact, he's sort of isolating. Could you present, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So hopefully you should have received a update sheet at the start of the meeting, and I'll quickly just run through the updates since the publishing of the agenda. So the first one is a revised site plan was received, which removes the ground source heat pumps from the proposed development, and a amended location plan was also received, which corrects the orientation of the north arrow, and as such, condition 1 has been updated to represent the new plans that have been submitted. And then a amended tree report and tree protection plan was also submitted. The one initially submitted had the previously refused scheme detailed on it. This has just been updated to to show the current scheme of WA 2021-01909. The tree officer has reviewed it and is satisfied that sufficient tree protection fencing can be provided to protect the trees of amenity value. And as such, condition 12 has also been added, that the development should be carried out in accordance with this updated tree protection plan. So moving on to the presentation. So yeah, this application is for the erection of 2 detached single-story dwellings following the demolition of the existing single-story semi-detached dwellings. Next slide, please. The site is situated within the grounds of Hillside Farm. The site itself, which you see in the red line, was subject to a certificate of lawfulness granted in 2018, which confirmed that the site was in lawful use as 2 separate dwellings. To the south of the red line is a dwelling converted from one of the barns at the site, and to the north are some agricultural barns. Further to the north is the Church Place nursery scheme, currently under construction for 18 dwellings, and to the west are 2 neighbours of 1 and 2 Arvon cottages. Next slide, please.
Sorry, could you please point out those 2 cottages?
So it's to the west. So if you go west towards, there you go, these 2 there. So from the aerial view, the site is located approximately where the red pin is. You can see that much of the land to the south and to the east is open, and can also see the north. The Church Place nursery scheme has currently commenced, and I think it is more advanced than this latest aerial photo shows. Yeah, next slide, please. This is photo A, looking up the site from the entrance gate, with the existing dwellings of 1 and 2 old dairy cottages on the left and the barn conversion on the right. Next slide, please. Photo B shows the western elevation of the existing dwelling and part of the existing residential curtilage. Next slide, please. Photo sheet C looks westwards towards the main road and down the existing garden area. You'll note the early mature conifer trees, which are of landscape value and subject to the tree protection plan. And also to the right-hand side, you can see the dwelling of 2 Arvon cottages. Next slide, please. Photo D looks eastward, back up towards the existing dwelling and the amenity area as well. Next slide, please. And photo E is taken from the eastern part of the site, looking back towards the courtyard area of the existing dwellings. The building is approximately split in line with the chimney into 2 dwellings. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed site plan. Unit A is set to the west and is set off the boundary with the neighbour of 2 Arvon cottages by approximately 4 meters. And Unit B is situated within the existing footprint of the existing dwellings to be demolished. Next slide, please.
No, excuse me. Could you go back, please? May I say that these are illegible? There's text on them. I think it's upside down. I can't make head nor tail of it. Could you please indicate clearly with a cursor where the 2 proposed buildings are? Thank you.
So so the cursor is now currently on Unit A, which is 4 meters from the boundary, and then if you go to the right, that's Unit B, which is within the footprint of the existing dwelling. Next slide, please. So this is the elevations of Unit A. So there, you can see it's single story in stature with accommodation situated within the roof space. Next slide, please. And then here are the proposed floor plans. Shows that Unit A would be a 1-bedroom dwelling. Next slide, please. And then these are the proposed elevations of Unit B. It's mostly a flat roof with a gable end. It's also single story in stature with no accommodation in the roof. Next slide, please. And the floor plans demonstrate to be a 2-bedroom dwelling. Next slide. So previously, a scheme was put forward before the committee under WA 2020-1356, again for 2 dwellings, replacing the existing 2 dwellings. However, this was refused based on an overbearing impact to the neighbour at 2 Arvon cottages and harm to the AONB through light pollution through the additional glazing proposed. This slide shows the previously refused site plan, and you can sort of compare the differences between the 2. So as you can see, what is Unit B has now been moved away from the boundary and into the existing footprint as previously mentioned, and the separation of Unit A from the boundary is 4 meters, which is an improvement from the refused situation. Next slide, please. This is the refused elevation of Unit A. As you can see, the 2 gable ends were fully glazed, which contributes to the light pollution, the AONB. Which formed the second reason for refusal. Comparing it to the current proposed Unit A, this glazing has been removed and it just has regular windows now. Next slide, please. And Unit B remains visually fairly similar, but it is moved, as I said previously, within the footprint of the existing dwellings. Next slide, please. So the main matters of consideration relate to the current application. The main consideration relates to if the current application has overcome the previous reasons for refusal, those being the impact on the AONB and impact on residential amenity. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Carl. We have a number of public speakers on this particular item, and we shall start with a Mr. and Mrs. Warren and a Dr. and Mr. Turner, who were sharing the speaking as objectors. I don't know, you wish to play this, the Warrens and the Turners? I'll leave it to you. 4 minutes, please, your maximum.
Hi, can't get the video on. We thank you for the opportunity to speak and relate our concerns. The present bungalow sits in a plot of ample size to accommodate both buildings being proposed. In moving Unit A towards Arvon cottages, advancing the roof ridge by 16.5 metres, plus increasing the height by 1.25 metre makes a huge difference to the present outlook and amenity of Arvon cottages. This large building will be clearly visible, impacting on the rear living space at 1 and 2 Arvon cottages. Unit A is not a 1-bedroom single-storey building. It has a building footprint 50% larger than 3-bedroom 2 Arvon cottages, a second floor and roughly the same volume, the eaves being just 0.5 metre lower. This is a large building with large windows, roof lights and bifold doors through which light can be intrusive on us, the neighbours, and impact on wildlife habitats. Lights will be seen across fields in this dark village setting. Unit B would have a similar impact, but is facing into a greater incline and therefore obscured by present buildings also. Concluding the original footprint is the best setting. I hand over to Anthony Turner.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm speaking for my mother who lives in 2 Arvon cottages. This is the second time that we've spoken at a committee hearing, and it was rejected last time for 2 reasons. One is that the siting of the last proposal would be an unacceptable overbearing impact to the neighbouring property and for unacceptable light pollution. Since then, the applicant has both appealed that decision and made this new application. Now, we looked at this very carefully and I hope with a very open mind to see whether we think it will be acceptable by comparison more to the existing than by the previous rejected application, because that's the way it's looked at from Arvon cottages. And unfortunately, we still think it will have an overbearing impact on 1 and 2. So as Angela said, this is all about the siting. So we do not object to the development. And we've always said this, but if it was in the same place as existing buildings. But our concern in particular about dwelling A is that it's been brought forward from where it is onto the neighbouring field and in clear sight of Arvon cottages. Now that I think is quite clear from the photos that Carl helpfully put up around the views, where one can see Arvon cottages from the proposed site. And one can also see from the plans the size of that building, which is set at right angles to the Arvon cottages garden. It's in very clear view. I think the point we made last time is that the way Arvon cottages work is that they all face towards the new building. So everything is down the garden. They don't face onto the road. So the way people live there is going out backwards into the garden. And that means there's quite a big impact where there is something in the field next door when there hasn't been before. So facing Arvon cottages itself will be a triple bifold door, which comes from the dining room, 2 ground floor windows from the kitchen and an office, and a dormer. On the north side, facing the garden, are 2 ground floor windows from an office and a living room. And it strikes us that these are the habitable areas of the property. And given that the remaining windows and doors face onto the other properties in the neighbouring plot, it's very natural that the inhabitants of dwelling A will orientate the way they live to face outwards towards Arvon cottages. So this is incredibly different to the current position. It is overbearing in our view. It is a very big difference. There is an impact on loss of privacy, both for the house, for the view over what is otherwise fields, but also for the garden, because there'll be a building and a garden right next door to it. Just touching on light quickly, the windows and doors I mentioned have an impact.
Sum up, please, Mr. Turner.
Did you say time up, sorry?
Yes, please, if you can sum up, please.
Yeah, great. So, I mean, I think in summary, we do not agree that the changes and the proposals do not have an overbearing impact. We think that they do, and that there's also an impact on light for the neighbours and more generally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that contribution. Right, our next public speaker is in fact Stuart Hall, who is an architect speaking in support of the application. Mr. Hall.
Good evening. Right, I'll run through my notes. If I've got any time left, I'll respond to those points.
You've got 4 minutes, okay?
Thank you. The current application at Hillside Farm is made in response to a refusal for a similar application that was given in January. There were 2 reasons for refusal. One was the overbearing impact on 2 Arvon cottages, and 2 was unacceptable light pollution due to extensive glazing. There were no other reasons for refusal. We've responded directly to these 2 reasons for refusal in the following design changes. The proposed dwellings are now further away than in the previous application, and the amount of glazing in the proposals has been reduced. In more detail, the first reason for refusal, overbearing impact on 2 Arvon cottages, has been mitigated through the following steps. We've moved the dwellings further away, so the nearer dwelling A, has gone from being 24 metres away to 30 metres away from 2 Arvon cottages. That's a 25% increase. The further dwelling, B, has moved back from 25 metres away to 43 metres away. That's a 50% increase. We've also rotated both dwellings to reduce any overbearing relationship to 2 Arvon cottages, and to divert any views from the house away from the neighbouring houses. I don't understand where Mr. Turner thinks that the houses are looking towards Arvon cottages, particularly with bifold doors. I don't think that's true. We've responded to the second reason for refusal, the extent of glazing, by reducing the number and size of windows. The existing dwelling, not the refused scheme, the existing dwelling has 49 square metres of glazing in the walls and 36 square metres of glazing in the roof, totaling 85 square metres. This includes a conservatory, 2 conservatories. Photo B, incidentally, in your presentation, showed the conservatory facing 2 Arvon cottages. There's a lot of glazing there, which we would improve. So these reductions in the glazing, the proposed dwellings total 42 square metres of glazing in the walls and the roof, which is half the existing extent of glazing. So in that aspect, we must be creating a benefit to the dark sky aspect of the area of outstanding natural beauty. This application also shares characteristics with the previous application by making various improvements to the openness of the green belt and to visually harmonise this part of the A on B. So when comparing the proposals with the existing dwelling, we offer a substantial decrease in the footprint and volume. That's not normal for development. We've taken the floor area from 219 square metres to 153 square metres. That's a 30% reduction in the footprint. We've taken the volume of the building from 671 cubic metres to 551 cubic metres. That's an 18% reduction. And I just back this up by saying there's no objection in principle from Planning Officer Carl Houston. So we ask that members recognise that we have redesigned the scheme to respond to the 2 reasons given for refusal of the previous scheme and approve these proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right on the nose, really. The next public speaker is the Speaker from Frensham Parish Council, who is Sharon Turner-Mumford, I'm advised. Sharon, your turn.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Area Committee and members of public. Councillor Sharon Turner from Frensham Parish Council. Our objection was Frensham Parish Council acknowledges the permission of 2 dwellings, but we did object to the design and preceded materials, notably sheet metal roofing and black timber cladding on the walls, which are considered to be unsympathetic with the rural location and surrounding properties. Thank you.
That was quick. Right. And of course, the ward council, one of the ward councillors, Councillor Julia Potts, wishes to speak. You have 4 minutes now, Councillor Potts, and you'll have 4 minutes at the end if you still wish. Councillor.
Chairman, thank you very much, and good evening, Chairman, members of the public and members of the committee. Thank you also to members who took the time and were able to attend a site visit last week, which I trust you found helpful. And firstly, if I may, I'd like to start, Chairman, with a point of personal clarification for residents who have queried the Vale Williams supporting report with this application of May 2021. And I refer to section 4 and 2 parts of that, which stated these changes have been subject to informal email exchanges between the applicant, ward councillors, and the applicant and case officer. I should stress, as one of the ward councillors, I was not consulted. I don't have an issue with that. I do have an issue with what the report then went on to say. 4.6, the result of this informal email exchange was that the revised proposals could be supported in planning terms. That was not the case, a sadly, factually misleading document, which I think all of us, members and residents, would agree isn't helpful. I'd like to thank Carl and the other members of the planning team at Waverley who worked hard for a period of time to get this report revised, but I'm sure that we would all agree it's not helpful in promoting trust and confidence in the planning process, nor in applications, including the application this evening. This actual application before you does not significantly address a number of the concerns raised by the committee in January when the application was refused. It's worth reminding ourselves, as has been mentioned already, that this sits in AONB, AGLV, and is very much a greenbelt rural site. Comments were made earlier and you were shown what is now actually almost a completed scheme at neighbouring Churt Nursery. That's actually further away, and in terms of the topography of that site, sits 3 to 4 metres below ground level, so it isn't that obtrusive. And I think what we need to do this evening is really focus on the impact on amenity, on the residential amenity of of Arvon cottages. Nobody, as we said earlier, as Mr. Turner so eloquently stated, is objecting to development there. We all agree there needs to be development, but as we stated at the last committee meeting, it's about appropriate development on the right site, and that is on the footprint and the area around the existing bungalows, not moving one of the units substantially forward, which will have a huge negative impact. And that can be very clearly seen if you go back to pictures C and D that Carl put up earlier. Unit B itself has indeed been moved and the siting is far less obtrusive. But Unit A is more visible at the front of the field. And as Mr. Turner has said, and we can see from the plans, there is a huge impact still, not just with the glazing, but with the actual spread of the development. And if you refer to page 14, the bottom of your report, the final paragraph of page 14, it starts by states across the first 3-4 lines of that paragraph that the proposal would increase and spread the built form across the site. And it then
Can you sum up, please, Councillor?
It continues about that impact. If permission were granted at this stage, and unless permitted development rights were removed, we could see more tweaks to the design, changes in orientation of the dwelling, and even more erosion of the neighbouring amenity at Arvon cottages. So members, in conclusion, for these reasons, I would request this evening that you respectfully reject this application and that we again refuse permission on the grounds given by ourselves and also the concerns flagged by the parish council so eloquently this evening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Councillor Potts, and you will have an opportunity at the end, of course, to add anything else you may wish to add. Right, councillors, your turn. Councillor Neil.
Thank you, Chair. I visited the site last week, so I have that benefit of having seen it. I think I'm minded to take the view that the architects have responded to the previous objections. There does seem to be quite a distance between the buildings in terms of impact on those two cottages, and they don't seem to be being looked into directly. So on balance, although I can understand the concerns of those who are objecting, I tend to favour recommending this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors wish to speak?
Yes, I remember this well from the last time. It wasn't very long ago, was it really? And know the site well. I'm not convinced that the changes have addressed what I think is the most important thing, which is this borough's respect for the green belt and the area of standing natural beauty. If we don't make a stand and protect these areas, how can we expect anybody else to do so? And we have won a lot of appeals recently on the green belt, the protection of the green belt. As Councillor Potts said, were this to be something on the footprint of an existing building, I might not like the design, but I would accept it that it was just my taste. I can also understand that when you're in a sort of agricultural area, design is different from something you'd expect on the Burnham Close in the middle of Farnham. But I don't think that this has fully addressed all the issues. I think the harm to the green belt is still too great. And I think, we have to protect these areas. We have to protect both the green belt and the AONB. In policy terms, we don't make any difference. We say you cannot have greater harm than exists already. And I am afraid, I don't really think this overcomes it. And it'll be interesting to see the appeal when it goes through. If that goes through, if people, depending on what we decide tonight, to see how much respect the inspectorate still has for the green belt. But certainly it's been beefed up in the MPPF, and we have been relatively successful recently on those appeals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillors?
Yes, good evening. Thank you. I wanted to speak briefly about the design. I think the wood cladding, the dark wood cladding is interesting in that it takes design notes from ancient barns, and we have got very good examples of those in Wamborough, not very far from here. But I think what disturbs me is, well, the wood cladding might work as a design concept, putting a tin roof on it in no way harks back to that ancient design. So I concur with what the local council town council is saying, is that this is not really a design that we'd want to endorse. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have the first thing is I do object to a single story dwelling, because Unit A is not a single story dwelling. It has 2 floors. A single story is a single story like Unit B. So I think the officers need to be careful when they say single story. It concerns me that the other half of the roof, which is obviously exactly the same size as the one that's got the bedroom in it, can obviously be used for residential and not just as an attic conversion. So they could drop the other half of that house down to the same level as Unit B for the roof, which would then prove to us and guarantee me that that room's not going to be used as a bedroom, even if it doesn't have windows, because they have to come back and stick a window in it. Actually, I've got no problem with the wood cladding and the galvanized roof, because that's like a country barn. Chiddingfell's got loads of black wood buildings with tin roofs, and the one next door to me, right in the middle of Chiddingfold on the green, has got wooden cladding. It has actually got a tiled roof, but that's in a residential area. I am sympathetic to the people in the cottages, but I think actually on balance, as it says in the agenda, that I think it is appropriate. They are 2 smallish properties, and after last night, I think the green belt is going to be very interesting. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wish to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask the officer just to clear up a couple of things for me? The first is that if you could go back to the site plan, or the block plan rather. Right. Could you be kind enough, and here I will admit I did not attend the site visit. I didn't know I was going to be attending this meeting then. There's obviously some sort of building in the bottom right-hand corner. There's 3 car parking spaces. What is that?
So that is that's an existing dwelling. It was subject to a barn conversion application a number of years ago. Yeah, so it's a dwelling.
Right, and is it of the same or greater height than the buildings that we're discussing?
It's of similar proportions, so it's again a sort of a single-story, single-story barn.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, on page 10 of our pack, you've got the gable ends of Unit A, which is the one clearly is causing slightly more concern to the Arvin Cottage residents. Which end is the one that faces towards Arvin Cottage? Is it the left-hand one or the right-hand one? The text is too small for me to tell. Yes, there. Left or right? Which one faces?
It's the right-hand one without a first floor window.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, that's fine. I have to say that I agree with Councillor James. I think that despite its rural location, it is surrounded by other dwellings, and it seems a bit much to complain about additional impact on the green belt for that reason. Providing there's no chance of putting a window into that gable facing the cottages, I certainly think that the overbearing aspect, which was rightly raised last time, has been addressed. So I don't see any good reason why I can differ from the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor. Any other councillor wish to speak? Carl, do you want to add anything? A number of questions have been asked, but you want to add anything to your report?
I would come back on a few things if that's okay, Chairman. So I know there's been discussion about the green belt. I would like to emphasise that the last application wasn't refused on green belt terms and was found acceptable. This application, similar to that one, sort of results, while it is a slight spread in built form like the other one, it is a net reduction in built form. So there's actually a benefit to openness in this case. And in terms of impact to sort of the character of the AONB, the last one was sort of refused on sort of the impact of light pollution rather than the actual character of the dwellings themselves. So I think it'd be sort of a hard one to refuse it on. And then going to materials as well, there is a materials condition attached to the agenda report, so we would have control over materials should permission be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right. Councillor Potts, do you wish to add anything to what you've said before?
Yes, Chairman, if I may, thank you. There are a couple of points that I would like to raise, and as I say, it really is Unit A that I remain concerned about. For the sake of clarity, and I think Councillor Mullen, just so Councillor Mullen is clear with the question he was asking, the other buildings are all in the ownership of the applicant as well. And they're awaiting build out on some of those conversions as well. The real concern here is that, as I said earlier, if the building, especially in relation to Unit A, goes ahead, and that is the one that is concerning in terms of the material impact on Arvon cottages, that either the applicant or the homeowner at a later stage could come back in under permitted development rights and start changing it. Now, that happens all the time. We see that happening in planning terms, and I know the committee know that happens. So one of the things I would like the committee to look at, if they are minded to approve this application this evening, is that we look at actually removing the permitted development rights, as frequently happens on other applications, so that can't happen. And what is actually planned, if it has to be built, is built out. That we have very robust conditions. And I would also refer to the condition, I think it's condition 10, where it talks about the demolition of the bungalows, and there doesn't appear to be a need for the existing dwellings, the existing bungalows, to be demolished before the commencement of building works on the new dwellings that are proposed. So again, I think that condition needs looking at. And again, I think that we need to be really clear that the impact of the actual glass and the overbearing, especially along at number 2 Arvon cottages, is significant. But if we can at least, as a committee, if minded to approve, consider those points and actually put in some very robust conditions around those, and especially around permitted development rights, I think that in itself might give some form of comfort to the residents, because, as I say, we all know what will happen, and we all know that there will be a lot more tweaking, especially where we have basically a 2-story building under the guise of a single story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Potts. Could I ask Councillor Lewis Jones whether he wishes to comment on adding these, standing up with the conditions, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Lewis.
Okay, Brilliant. Thank you. I don't have an issue with a condition being attached in principle if it's being attached in response to perceived planning harm. All I would say is that we should steer away from applying blanket a condition which takes away all permitted development rights. Instead, we should try and specify precisely which classes of permitted development we would like to see taken away, so that we aren't unnecessarily taking away classes that don't relate to the planning harm that has been identified. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does any councillor wish to speak on that matter?
Well, condition 6 is the one that I always used to ask for. It's already there, so they can't put windows upstairs or the window at the end facing Arvin Cottage unless they come back to apply for it. So I'm happy with that one. And quite frankly, condition 10, they can't build unit B, and because it's on the footprint of they've got to demolish 1 and 2 cottages because they're going to build one on it. So it can't be occupied. Otherwise, they can't build it unless they build it on, 24-foot stilts over the top of it, and they're not allowed to. So that one is there. Building A possibly could be built before the dairy cottages are demolished. I mean, if you want to strengthen that one, the development shall not be started until the demolition of 1 and 2 dairy cottages, then I'm happy with that. But the condition 6 is there to cover those windows to protect going upstairs for a 2-floored building. I'd be happy if they lowered the roof on the left-hand side, but as it is, I'm quite happy with it, but the conditions are there. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Anyone else wish to speak? No? Right. I think we'll take this first as it stands, actually, in the sense that subject to conditions 1, which is slightly revised, to 11, and the new condition 12 on the update sheet, and informers 1 to 6, permission be granted. Could those be in favour of those, please raise their hands, please? Against? Against? Abstain? What's the result, Kimberly?
Thank you, Chairman. So we have 8 for, 1 against, and no abstentions.
Permission is granted as stated, yes. Thank you. Can we move on now, please? We now come to applications not subject to public speaking, and the first one, well, we've got 2 on the same site, and that, for reasons which I hope you'll understand, I want to take the second one first, actually, rather than, if you know something, yeah? Which is the WA 2021-01109 land at Poundland, 2 to 3 the Borough of Farnham, GU9, 7 and A, a partial use of existing roof as a shared amenity space and erection of a staircase. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, we'll come here. In fact, Councillor Neil, do you wish to, since you've declared interest, do you wish to? Okay. Your turn to give a report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. As discussed, I'm going to present item 9.2 first, which relates to the planning permission rather than the listed building consent first. Right, the application is for the partial use of an existing roof as a shared amenity space and the erection of a staircase. It should be noted that part of the proposed amenity space and staircase are already in place, but they're not in use, with a locked door preventing access. The application site is located to the northwestern side of the borough in Farnham Town Centre. It comprises a 3-storey building with the ground floor forming a retail premises, which is Poundland. Permission was granted in 2016 for the change of use and alterations to the 1st and 2nd floor to provide 12 dwellings. And the flats are accessed through a secure alleyway from the borough. So moving on to the floor plans. So the top plan here is as approved. And the plan to the bottom is as proposed, and it shows the the location of the proposed staircase here. Only 6 flats of the 12 would have access to this staircase and roof space, and it's only accessible from the doorway to those flats. So the other 6 of the 12 do not have access or would not have access. And these flats, as indicated on both plans, already have small amenity spaces of their own, comprising of screened balconies. So the roof, moving on to the roof plan, the existing roof is this area here on the top plan. The applicant proposes to use only part of this roof as shared amenity space, which comprises 76 square meters. There's an existing 1.8 meter obscure glazed screen that surrounds the roof space. This distance here is 3 meters, and this distance here is 3.8, which shows that the partial roof space is set in from the screen and from the existing screens. The application also proposes fixed 1.1 meter high planters and planting, which would be set in from these existing screens, indicated by the green on the plan. And therefore the roof space proposed is much reduced from the scheme that was refused in 2015, which was for the entire roof space to be used by 13 dwellings. So it's much reduced. In terms of the elevations, you're not able to see these screens from the borough. When we come on to the photos, I'll demonstrate this more clearly, but the only place in which you can see these screens is to the rear. And you can see here the only difference would be the staircase as here on the proposed plan. So moving on to the photos. This photo is taken from on the roof terrace looking to the south towards the borough. This photo is looking towards the southeast. This one to the east. This one to the northeast towards, so to give a bit of context, Castle Street is in front of those buildings there. This one looks northwest towards the castle. This one is looking northwest, just slightly further to the side of the stairs. This one is looking southwest, sort of towards the borough. Now this photo is taken from, there are sealed doors as you come from the borough, which are only accessible by the residents. And that's where you see the first glimpse of the screens, which are existing from that elevation. And this is taken from the rear, which is the delivery yard for the retail premises along the borough, including Poundland. And this is the door from inside the 6 flats that you would use to access the roof. And as I said before, it's only accessible by the residents of those 6 flats. So turning to the main matters for consideration, in terms of heritage, design and impact on visual amenity, the proposal would not be highly visible. The council's historic buildings officer considers that the proposal would have little or no direct impact on the host listed building or the setting of any neighbouring historic assets. The proposal would civilise a dull roofscape and would discourage further clutter, which would be a legitimate benefit of the proposal. In terms of the impact on residential amenity, the proposed amenity space would be set in from the boundaries of the existing roof space, and the existing obscure glaze 1.8 metre glass screens would prevent views outside of this amenity space. The fixed 1.1 metre planters would further restrict views. Officers are satisfied that the proposal would not result in overlooking or loss of privacy. There would be no material harm by way of overbearance, loss of light or loss of outlook. In terms of noise and disturbance, officers note the concerns raised regarding the potential use of the space. It is noted that the application site is in a busy town centre location. It should be noted that the amenity space would and could only be accessed by 6 flats. These flats would have their own private amenity space in the form of screened balconies in addition to this space. The Council's Environmental Health Officer has reviewed the proposal and raises no concerns subject to the submission and agreement of a noise management plan. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. My word. Oh, go on, Councillor Bean.
Thank you. And I thank the officers for arranging the site visit the other day. The photos, it's difficult to imagine what the photos relate to what I saw, because the actual screening when you get up there is tall. You can't actually see over them. So to get a perspective of height, you cannot see over those canopies. There's probably another foot over the top of your head, but before you could see. So it would be difficult to even climb them. I found no problem with this application at all. I think it's a good use of space. It's there. I don't see that anybody's going to abuse it. Yes, you could have some noisy parties, but of course there are already controls on noise and pollution in areas. So personally, I would favour this application.
Yes, it's a good job you arrived just in time for the start, otherwise I couldn't allow you to speak. Anyway.
Mr. Chair, I sincerely apologise for arriving late. I got the time wrong.
You arrived just as Philip was about to start the presentation. So
yeah, I did.
Sorry, on a point of order, Mr. Chairman, is it actually in order for someone who hasn't been present for the entire item to take part? I was told that it was not.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Yes, Chairman, I have just checked with Fiona and she said that Councillor Hess didn't arrive before the item started. So therefore he would be excluded, but he could vote on B1 when we do that, but not on B2 because we'd already started.
Okay, I'll take it. I can't allow you to speak on this particular item, I'm sorry. You deserve to speak.
Thank you, Chair. I have some concerns about this one. I would refer you back to the points raised by Farnham Town Council on page 31, which I think are still relevant. Added to that, I'm aware that it's a retrospective planning application, which is something we don't generally approve of. On a safety point of view, there is no fire escape from the roof. One's marked, but it doesn't actually go anywhere. Now, this is very significant. You know, I needn't mention Grenfell Tower or anything like that, but you've got to have a proper fire escape. Secondly, there's a new entrance to the roof. I don't know whether it was applied for or not, but it's got a metal staircase, a spiral metal staircase, which is very difficult to go up, as any of us that did the site visit will appreciate. It had cardboard on it to make it a bit more grippy, but nevertheless, it wasn't. And the roof terrace, actually the entry was that part in the middle, but it's been moved over and I'm not sure it's completely adequate. So I have concerns about this. Also, the actual physical size of it means it will incorporate a lot of people if they want to have a party or whatever up there. Yes, you can't see over the screens without climbing, so I would agree with that side of things. If planters are put round there, even more difficult to see over, though how the roof loading will go on that, I really don't know. So they're my concerns. And did I have another point? Yes, I believe there was some enforcement action on that, which encouraged this planning application to go through. I did ask who had the freehold of the roof, and Philip was going to look into that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you again. I mean, I will say, nobody likes retrospective planning applications. I mean, none of us do. But I mean, we have what we have, and we have to judge it on that basis. You mentioned things about health and safety. I'm not sure those, Beth, those are not planning considerations.
Thank you, Chairman. No, you're right. Health and safety in terms of access and egress, safe egress, governed by building control. So there is separate legislation to take care of aspects like that, and actually the internal staircase as well. They would be interested in how safe that was. They're dealing with the safety of and structural integrity of the building. but it's not something that we can consider as part of this planning application. Thank you, Chairman.
I know it sounds crazy, Councillor, but those are the rules of the game, as it were, as it currently stands. And so, yes, okay.
Thank you, Chairman. So whilst it's partly retrospective, it hasn't been fully developed. So whilst Councillor Bishop, I appreciate we got up on the roof and had a look, it's not as set out in the plans. They haven't put in the planters. They haven't. The fire escape sign was confusing, but I spoke to the applicant on site, and that they haven't set, because they don't have permission yet, they haven't set the area up as it would be if they did have permission. So they would have the relevant signs and planters, etc. In terms of who owns it, the freeholder does own it. I checked that with the applicant. And yeah, in terms of the cardboard on the stairs, it isn't, the use isn't permitted, therefore they don't have it set up for that use at this stage. So it's partly retrospective in as much as we can get up on the roof at the moment to observe that area. I think that was everything.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wish to speak? Oh, Coburn.
Yes, I mean, I find this sort of difficult in some ways and easy in others, you know. I mean, instinctively, I think, well, you know, good for them. You know, I'd like to have a place to sit out if I lived in a flat. I, of course, wrote the Farnham Conservation Area Management Plan with Sarah Wells some time back. And, you know, I have this sort of motherly instinct to protect every bit of the conservation area, but, you know, realistically, at the back of the buildings, especially at the back of these sort of buildings, we're not talking of an area of great beauty. And, you know, the effect on the conservation area, which I do take very seriously, you know, is really, well, non-existent almost, isn't it? Certainly minimal. So, although there's 101 little reasons why I sort of I'm not swept along with enthusiasm for this, I think, you know, in policy terms, we have no reasons to refuse it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other councillor wish to speak? Right. Well, we better move on to the recommendation then, as it stands. And the recommendation as it stands is, in fact, okay, is that subject to conditions 1 to 4 and informants 1 to 3 permission be granted. For those in favour, I'm afraid Councillor actually can't vote. Those in favour? Against? No. No. Against? Abstain? Result, please, Kimberly.
We have 6 in favour, 1 against and no abstentions, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Just to explain again, as we've done it in reverse order, we've done the planning permission first, and we're now going down to the listed building consent, which, since you're here, you can comment on if you so wish. Right, the next one is WA 2021-001105, land at Poundland 2 to 3, the Borough of Farnham, GU97NA, and that is for the listed building consent of partial use of the existing roof as a shared amenity space and erection of a staircase. Philippa, do you want to add anything more to your presentation?
Thank you, Chairman. No, the presentation would be as stated previously, but the only matter to consider here is the impact on the listed building, which, as I said previously, officers are satisfied that the proposal would have little or no direct impact on the listed building or indeed any of the neighbouring historic assets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak on this item? No? Oh, wow. Right. Sure. Favourable peace. Right. Okay. Well, there's no one who speak. We'll move on to the recommendation. That's subject to conditions 1 to 2. The informative listed building consent be granted. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Against? Abstain?
Councillor Blishin, were you
Abstaining.
abstaining?
Yes. Good. Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. So that's 7 for, none against and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Oh, well, could you ask them to come back in, please? Beth will do it.
Chairman, I will withdraw now.
come in, and then we shall do the final item of the night. We're on to the final item now of the night of this evening, which is WA 2020-02057, the land at Brackenfell, Gracewood Road, Hazelmere, GU 27 2BP, a proposal for erection of a dwelling, entrance gates and piers, and associated works for demolition of existing dwelling. Daniel is the officer.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I have the following verbal updates to add. It was identified that the street scene drawing 58810B had not pulled through to the council's website. It had been referenced in condition 1 in the plans and will be identified in the presentation later. There was also a minor update to the construction management plan drawing 58809, which had been submitted, and condition 1 has been amended accordingly. The correct drawing is revision C. The amendments to the previous drawing are minor and do not affect the assessment in any way. The amendments identify the location of drainage runs to existing mains drainage, vehicle parking for site personnel, locations for loading and unloading materials, and storage of plant and materials. The application has been brought before the Planning Committee as the application has been submitted by an agent who is a relative of a member of staff, and it falls outside the council scheme of delegation. The application is for the erection of a dwelling, entrance gates and piers and associated works following demolition of the existing dwelling. Brackenfell is within the built-up area of Hazelmere, where the principle of development is acceptable. The proposal is acceptable with regards to the impact on character and residential amenity. The planning balance assessment concludes that the proposal is in accordance with the development plan. As such, planning permission is recommended for approval. This slide shows the location plan. The application site is on the east side of Gracewood Road within a residential area of low density. Brackenfell is a detached chalet bungalow set to the rear of the plot. The site is comprised of a long front garden and private driveway, rear garden and attached double garage. This slide shows the aerial view, which shows the position of Brackenfell pinpointed in the centre of the aerial shot. The new dwelling would replace the existing dwelling to the rear north of the block. The block plan, this slide indicates the block plan for the proposed development. The drawings demonstrate that the new dwelling would be largely built over the footprint of the existing dwelling. I'll just go back to the location plan so you just get an idea of where the existing dwelling sits and the block plan there. These are some photos of the site. 1 and 2, the front and rear elevation of the existing dwelling. Photograph 3 shows views looking southwest along the front garden towards the access point from Gracewood Road. I've included photograph 4. It shows an elevated view looking southeast towards one of the nearest residential properties, Tall Pines, or Lombards as it's called as well. The large building that's positioned directly in front here is a large 2-storey double garage with pitched roof and store, which serves Tall Pines and is 5.5 metres in height. And I've just included just an elevation there just to demonstrate that. And the reason why I've included that I will discuss later on. This slide shows the existing elevations of Brackenfell with an overall ridge height of approximately 5.9 metres. And this is the proposed dwelling, which shows the elevations of the new dwelling The raised roof would be approximately 8.2 metres in height, an additional 2.3 metres overall. The proposed materials would be similar to surrounding built form and sympathetic to the surrounding architecture. These are the existing floor plans, and they show a total gross internal area of 188.7 metres squared spread over 2 floors. And these are the proposed floor plans, and this indicates a total gross internal area of 248.8 metres squared spread over 2 floors. This was the drawing that didn't pull through. This is the street scene drawing, and this demonstrates the overall increase in height of the proposed dwelling, and then you can just see hashed to the left there, that's the existing dwelling. What you may not be able to make out, I don't know how well you can read that, but it indicates that the hash lines above indicate the height of surrounding dwellings. So you have tall pines, which sits higher, and then Westbury, which sits at the same level. That's to the north of the proposed dwelling. So even though there is an increase in overall height, it still sits either at the same height or lower than height to the surrounding dwellings. The main matters for consideration are the design and impact on the design and visual impact. The design would be sympathetic to local form, and the dwelling would be well separated from surrounding dwellings. There would be no harmful impact on the street scene due to its position. Residential amenity. The side windows serving a bedroom on the southeastern flank would be acceptable given the large 2-storey garage at Tall Pines. So I'll just go back to the elevations there, and you can see the drawing on the right, the side elevation. That is the one that would face Tall Pines, and the three windows are proposed to be obscure glazed. The 2 to the left are not. And it was concluded that these 2 windows would be blocked by that tall garage, so we didn't feel it was necessary to obscure glaze those windows. The standard of accommodation would comply with the national standards. The impact on trees. There are 2 Austrian pines 32 metres from the dwelling at the front boundary. There is no change to the access, and the new dwelling would be outside the RPA, the root protection area, sorry. And due to the proximity, topography and presence of existing hard standing, it was concluded that there would be no harmful impacts. Finally, the impact on highways, parking and access. Highways have confirmed acceptability of the gates and piers and the likely impact on safety of the highway. The parking situation is shown on the block plan drawing. The gates are replacing existing and no change to the access is proposed. Therefore, it is considered to be acceptable. For the reasons outlined within this presentation and within the report, the proposed new development would be acceptable, and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Ooh, forest of hands. Now, Councillor Keane was just first, then and Councillor James and Councillor Cohen. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, yes, I know this area. This is in a large plot, and I think the new dwelling is well in keeping with other residences within the area. I think it's very acceptable. There is no problem with highways, and I think it's a very good replacement. So I have no problem with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor James.
No, it's wonderful to have an application that actually enhances what was there before. it's the perfect spot to build a beautiful, large, small Buckingham Palace, because we don't get any of these houses on huge planning Barratt box estates and all those things. So it's very, very nice to see a beautiful mansion being built in the appropriate place for somebody who can afford it. But it's lovely. Thank you, officers.
Councillor Coburn.
I totally agree with the two previous speakers. As soon as I win the lottery, I might make them an offer. My own, yes, true, I'll buy a ticket on the way home. My only slight nitpicking bit are these sort of gates and pillars that we're seeing everywhere. And it's from the biodiversity point of view. Now, I'm looking at the pictures and I know the gates are a small detail, but we're getting a heck of a lot of what I call, you know, sort of wooden walls all the way around, and then the pillars, and then the gates which go right down to the ground. I mean, you know, nothing apart from the tiniest little insects going to get through some of these bits. And I do think, again, as a borough who wants to enhance biodiversity, I think when we're looking at planning applications, anything we can do to encourage, you know, people to put in green boundaries is what I would prefer. But given that people like their fences and whatever, walls, you know, if they could just be encouraged to put in some little holes for things to get through. And, you know, I mean, speaking as somebody whose garden is totally overridden by animals, because we have absolutely, you know, no defense at all against them. You know, I do really feel that we should take biodiversity seriously, put it that way. We've got to have a biodiversity net game. And I do think perhaps, you know, in our determinations, if we could just encourage more and more people, you know, not to have these rather imposing, I think they look like London. I always think they're coming out into Farnham with their London ways, and Hazelmere in this case with their London ways. And, you know, it's just rather detrimental to wildlife and corridors. So any encouragement, but I certainly wouldn't turn a planning application down on that. Thank you.
I do agree with Councillor Coburn on this. I think we do tend to have a lot of these areas now where they want to have gates and what have you. When I think possibly it's a security issue, so therefore, you know, we can't blame them for that. But yes, it would be nice if somewhere along the lines there could be some kind of entry for something like a hedgehog or whatever. But no, we can't say to that. But yes, it's one of those things that I think is going to probably increase rather than decrease.
And of course, we're just dealing with this planning application tonight, as you all realise. I'm sure some words of encouragement could be put forward. And speak. Oh, Councillor Bishop.
Thank you, Chair. That's a most attractive house replacing a rather less than attractive house. And I've got no objections to that at all. I too would like to see the fence more available. I've got chestnut paling and all the way around, and you can tell by my front lawn that lots of things cross it. That is more like a fortress at the moment. So it would be nice if someone could consider letting animals into their garden. You know, this is a countryside after all. Thank you.
I'm sure Councillor Bishop, the right words can be passed down the line, as it were. Any other Councillor Bishop speak? No? Oh, okay. Well, can we move on to the recommendation? It stands that subject to conditions 1 to 10 and informatives 1 to 6, permission was granted. Those in favour, please raise their hands. Yeah. I don't think there's anybody not voted, huh?
No, Chairman, it's unanimous. Thank you.
Then it is granted. Thank you very much. Right, well, there's no further exempt items, so I shall close the meeting. We are due to meet next week on the 22nd. As you know, we've got 3 applications. I think they're all in Hazelmere. I am assuming that they'll still go ahead unless otherwise advised. Yes, Kimberly? Right, good night, everybody, and keep safe, please. We'll see.